record reflect that all committee members are present. And if we could have a motion for the July 8th, 2025 minutes.
Well, first, some.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye. And I should have just discussed real quick. I am curious, the minutes accurately reflect, it's the page 404, second to last paragraph, where it says that Chief Backus stated that there's a 41% increase in felonious assault. There's a recent LSJ article where Jordan Galkus actually said that that number is 17%. So I'm curious if anybody has talked to LPD to determine how that error occurred.
So I spoke to Chief Backus, and it's my understanding that they switched systems, and in doing so, somehow the felonious assault number was doubled. It still is up 17%, not 41, but it doubled that number is what I was explained to by the chief.
And can I just clarify that that is the only number that was inflated in that transition of systems, only that one percentage point, or were there others that were inaccurate?
So far as I know.
Okay.
So I do not know the answer to that.
Okay. Any other comments on minutes or information from our previous meeting?
Well, I just thought since that was actually stated on the record, we should have some clarity.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to public comment on agenda items for 3 minutes. We do have one member of the public present. If you'd like, please, if you'd like to state your name for the record.
Sure, it's Joe Neller with Simtop Management. Good afternoon. Just want to reiterate kind of the comments I made at City Council. Supportive of the ordinances, really appreciate the changes specific insurance ordinance, that it's no longer a mandate and was expanded to include renters insurance. However, there are some ideas that we've heard discussed about this ordinance that we fully support and would like to see explicitly included in the ordinance. Specifically, that the relocation happens after all other options have been exhausted, and that this does not take effect if the red tag is caused by tenant behavior. I know from this that these ordinances came from a very horrible situation where a resident was in substandard, unsafe living conditions and felt like they had no recourse. We certainly want to help those people. However, we just want to make sure that in the future, we can all sit here and understand this. The current administration can understand the intent of these ordinances, but we'd like to see more explicit language on those 2 points in particular, because in 6 years, 8 years, 10 years, none of us might not be around. And so we just want to make sure that the ideas that we support, that we've heard discussed by this committee, as the ordinances have been amendment and drafts and everything else, we'd like to see those explicitly included. So thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Seeing no other members of the public, and I don't believe we have anyone online this afternoon, we'll move to item 5B, presentation from the Lansing Fire Department. Chief Sturdivant, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon, committee. I want to talk a bit about our emergency weather siren platform and the deployment of our BLS units based on the Tri-County protocol approval. As you are aware, we've kind of been back and forth with the siren process here over the course of the last year or so. There's some areas of the city not covered as well as previous. There was some miscommunication with some of the community members thinking being indoors, they still should be able to hear. So we think we've done a relatively good job with clarity on some of that. But I do want to let the committee know that based on some sound tests and some monthly reviews based on the testing from Ingham County, we are prepared to expand the siren outreach with 4 new sirens over the course of the next couple of years. Of course, back in 2022, we reduced the number of sirens from 21 to 12 based on the decibel levels of the new sirens, thinking that we could reduce that maintenance cost, operating cost, while expanding the actual decibel. There still were some areas in the community that were not as well received as we anticipated. Back in August of last year, we conducted a siren review in the area of Cooper and Rundle. which was an area of frequent concern. We got quite a few complaints after activations or testing that stated the community still was struggling with hearing some of the sirens. And that assessment proved to be true. The sirens went off. We were there on site, and it still was kind of difficult to ascertain that this is what it is relative to a possible emergency. Now, we feel confident that 99% of the city is covered. Some neighborhoods just not as loud as we would like. So we have allocated funding to add 2 new sirens this year. One will go at the Debbie Stabenow Park near the soon to be occupied public safety complex there on South Washington. And the other will go at Mount Hope Avenue and Lindbergh Drive. Those will be done this year. Next year, we will place another siren at Letts Community Center and another one at MLK and Mary Avenue for a total of 4 over the course of the next 2 years. The funding has already been allocated. As a matter of fact, we've taken delivery of all 4. We're just in the process of completing the install, running the testing, ensuring that Ingham County is in the loop because they actually lead the siren program for us. And they are excited that we are looking to expand. And I think with what's been going on around the country with some of these weather-related events, the timing could not be any more perfect than what it is right now. So we actually received quite a bit of feedback from the community. I viewed the feedback as this is necessary, although some of it came in the form of a complaint. But again, we explored and investigated all, and it did reflect that we had some dead zones in the community. So just to let you know, we will be expanding the program with 4 different sirens, which will take us to a total of 16 in the city, which is closer to that 21 number that we initially had back in 2022 when we reduced them from 21 to 12. But with the higher level of decibel and the increased numbers, we feel very confident that we should be very good moving into this season of the weather events over the course of the next 24 months.
Thank you, Chief. I do have a question about the placement of the 4 new sirens over the next 2 years. It seems like there would be 3 on the south end of Lansing, either southwest or southeast, and 1 at Letts Community Center, which captures the west side. Were there any dead zones or folks that you heard from that could not hear the sirens on the north side of Lansing, northeast?
No.
Or west?
There was not. A lot of the chatter came from the south side of the city, southeast and southwest. And we conducted the sound testing with the manufacturer, the vendor, and they used a pretty scientific approach, which is called a sound plan map, which is a software-driven process to ascertain the decibel level. It takes into account weather, topography, structures, volume of traffic. It takes into account a number of pending issues that could cause a decrease in that noise level. And these were the recommended locations for the additions.
Okay, thank you. And then just one other follow-up question on that. Ingham County is responsible for monitoring, and ensuring that that signal goes out. How are we funding these 4 additional sirens? Is that county? Is
No,
that
this is-
city? How does that?
This is through the fire department budget, the budget that you folks graciously as council members approved for us, and we appreciate that. We have a line item in our emergency management budget for equipment and supplies, and we debit that line item for ongoing maintenance. And there's an allotment that is set aside for the siren program, since we do recognize how critical this is for the community.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from committee members on the sirens? Please, Councilman Cox.
Yeah. We had previously talked, I think, about Chief, about the one at Debbie Stabenow Park. So I appreciate that one because there were a lot of concerns from that neighborhood, especially over Cooper Street and that kind of small little area. I think there is one more that's on the northern part of the city, which is the Mount Hope and Lindbergh one, which would be the north side of Mount Hope.
Yeah, it is the
Yeah.
north side of Mount Hope, but there was not a negative impact to what was already in place. We're just looking to establish, as we identify those, for lack of a better term, the dead zones, and then areas that we could use some reinforcement. So, yeah, this was just to kind of shore up what was already in place and what was working effectively.
Yeah, because we have one at Foster, I believe.
Yeah.
So we gotta make sure the folks at Mount Hope Cemetery can hear the
Yes.
siren.
Absolutely, and we plan on a communication blitz.
Yep.
With website updates, Facebook updates, just to let it be known we are expanding, and we are going to continue to work with the county. They do the audible testing, and then they do the silent process, platform testing in alternate months. So yeah, we feel very, very good about what this is going to do for us moving forward.
And I appreciate all this because I know that this has been probably 2 years in the works,
It
trying to
is.
get, trying to get these extra sirens,
Yeah.
and, sound tests done with people having issues. So I think the added, the last time I saw the map, I think these added sirens in this area, I think will cover that, slim areas that are
Exactly.
just missed.
Yeah,
So,
there was a bit of a triangle area of the city
Yeah.
that the coverage could have been better. So, yeah, we wanted to address that.
thank you much.
Real quick, so if I understand it correctly, so the original deployment, that was done intentionally, it was done proportionally. But what you're saying is that there's other circumstances, topography to
Absolutely.
that cause. Okay, that makes sense.
Absolutely. And wind will come into play, and there's just a number of factors. That's why we're kind of coupled the process from a cross-reference standpoint with some physical application of let's be in place, can we hear, and what does the software show us? So we use a bit of technology from the software along with the manual physical being in place to see what we could hear. And it gave us some very good results.
I just want to say thank you because I think that's pretty responsive governance, right?
Well, yeah, and this committee kind of led some of the effort, so I appreciate all of the support. And our budget, it was never about the money. The money was there. It's just let's be as effective and as efficient as we can with what we know we need to do, and it worked out very, very well. So thank you, folks.
Yeah, thank you for the update. And the next item, deployment of basic life support ambulances within the Tri-County area.
Yes, as you folks are aware, 80% of our call volume is EMS related. Of that 80%, I would ascertain 38 to 40% of that is actually basic life support in nature. Stub toe, headache for 2 or 3 days, a fall, sprain, things of this nature. So we went back and forth with Tri-County over the course of the last couple of years with an interest, not only myself, but also all of the Metro fire departments and the Metro chiefs, that we need a process to where we could explore the deployment of basic life support ambulances, which means that the ambulances would be staffed with 2 EMTs as opposed to a paramedic and an EMT. Now, this went back and forth for quite a while. There was a transition in leadership there at the Tri-County Medical Board with Dr. Orr retiring out. The new medical director was appointed, and he kind of brought a fresh perspective to the table relative to what's going on in emergency medical services around the country. He agreed with the need that we need to at least try to see what impact BLS units could have within our system. So what Lansing is looking to do, based on the approval of this protocol change, it has been approved through the Tri-County Emergency Medical Control Authority, and it has been approved at state level for optional process to deploy basic life support ambulances beginning September 1. Over the course of the last 6 to 9 months, the Ingham County 911 Dispatch Center has been training their dispatchers and call takers with what is known as emergency medical dispatching, to where they actually have an ability to coach the caller through the initial onsets of the call to determine basically an early level of triage. And this is what you need to do to maintain an airway, control the bleeding, ensure the circulation is in place, the 3 essential critical components of EMS over the phone as units are en route. So with this approval, what Lansing is looking to do is, as you're aware, we're working through our deployment matrix because we will be moving into new Station 2 early part of November. We'll be looking to move into new Station 9 on the South Washington complex, probably after the first of the year. So we're taking this as an opportunity to look at our deployment matrix on where our rigs are, where the resources will be deployed. We are going to partner with the Michigan State grad student program for research analysis of our calls. We want to get a bit more scientific. We want to get a bit more empirical with the data as it relates to our calls for service. Up until this point, I've been on board 3 years now. There's been a lot of opinionating, editorializing, which is not bad, but I'm interested, and I've shared with the mayor that we want to transition that to a more qualitative and quantitative approach to what the system holds for the city of Lansing. So what we're going to do, as you're aware, we have five ALS ambulances in service right now. We're going to stand up a sixth ambulance. We're going to license it at an ALS level. So at any given point in time, if our BLS model does not prove to be effective for us, we can always upgrade it and staff it at the paramedic level. I think it's going to provide some benefit for us. We're going to beta test this BLS model over the course of an initial 90-day period. And if the data reflects that we need to transition it to an ALS medic unit, we can do that easily because it will be licensed at that level. If the data reflects that, hey, we're making a significant impact with those low acuity calls, that frees up the ALS units for the more serious calls, the heart attacks, the strokes, the STEMIs, then we will move forward with that as a model. So at the end of the day, we will be adding another ambulance to our system, which is a good thing regardless of the level of certification it has. And then we will maintain the flexibility to upgrade it to an ALS if need be, or to manage it at the BLS level, which a majority of our calls come in as. So we're excited about that. Still working through the education piece and the deployment piece with our members and what's taking place on the fire department. We have the MOU in place where all of our recent hires must become paramedics. So that pipeline will stay full and continue to be full up until the end of this contract, which does not expire until June of next year. So yeah, we feel very confident that this model is going to be a more efficient, effective model for us, which I've kind of committed to you all as council members, to the mayor, as we move into these new facilities that the community has graciously trusted us with, that we were going to increase our efficiency, our effectiveness, and we were really going to look to target what the community needs with these calls for service. So we're really excited about what this is going to do for us and just waiting to see what the data reflects.
Yeah, thank you so much. There's so much about this report out that I appreciate. Number one, data absolutely tells a story, right? So we're not just basing on opinion or feelings. We're using the actual data and numbers to reflect where the needs are, and then using resources, you know, in a way that makes sense. And in addition to that, you also have a plan if you need to pivot the initial plan, right? So there's flexibility built into this. And I think that's very important. As you said, you know, the ambulance can be adjusted so that if we find out this isn't working the way maybe it was intended to, that we can pivot and, you know, fit that ambulance for its full needs. So I think that's great. And it sounds like you're currently working on implementing this by September 1st.
Yes, we are. We've met with the union. We're meeting with the battalion chiefs. I met with them this morning. We will continue to craft the plan, but just to be clear, it's bigger than our ambulance deployment, because there are some questions in my mind based on my experience of, are we adequately deployed responsibly to address the calls with our fire engines and our fire trucks? So we're going to take a holistic 60,000 foot view of our deployment model, base it on some scientific data on where the calls drop, what areas of the city we see some redundancies. We're also going to be looking to explore a community paramedic program. And I'm not quite sure if you folks are aware of that, but this is a program that will allow our medics to work seamlessly with the University of Michigan Sparrow Hospital to reduce the recidivism of emergency room visits.
Okay.
We will work with discharged patients, help them maintain compliance with their meds, check in with them periodically, see if there are any needs. And what that does for us is it decreases the amount of traffic in the emergency rooms, which right now it is an issue. We have up to 2-hour wait times from the time we deliver a patient to the hospital to the time we actually clear. A lot of this is for a number of reasons. The beds upstairs may not be clear, so there's no room to admit. So the ER is a holding pattern of staffing in the ER may be limited. So you've got one nurse working. There's a number of reasons why the wait times can be the way they are. So we're looking to just come up with some creative solutions on how we can address that, to have a more positive impact, not only on the system, but on our members also.
Yeah, thank you for that. I just have two quick questions and then I'll open it up. The first question, the community paramedic program that's in the works, do we have capacity for that? It sounds like additional responsibilities, more frequent check-ins with residents and with the number of staff and folks that you have today. Do you have capacity?
Yeah, I think we do. This is exploratory in nature right now. If you remember correctly, when I first came on board, we had Army of One with an EMS chief, with EMS being 80% of our call volumes. In my mind, it just didn't make sense. We needed to build the capacity. That EMS chief now has 2 EMS captains that report to him, and we will be looking to assign light duty paramedics that may be off for whatever injury, but can work light duty to assist with this program. So it's exploratory right now, but we feel that it has some value. And again, we're just looking for any creative solution to help decrease that log jam that we see day in and day out in the emergency rooms. I was told at one time Lansing had 4, maybe 5 hospitals. So they've reduced that to 2, and the calls have gone through the roof. And that trajectory, we have to get creative with how we can problem solve something like that.
Yeah, thank you. And then because this, it was outlined, this is a tri-county effort, Ingham, Eaton, and Clinton County. I was just looking for maybe an update or if you have any information on the mutual agreement that was previously in place with DeWitt Township. Has that item been resolved? What does that look like?
That item has been resolved. We removed ourselves from that mutual aid agreement with DeWitt. It was totally one-sided, and we were basically subsidizing their EMS services into that community. So we did provide them with a letter and I think it was a 45-day notice that would allow us to withdraw, and got that letter crafted from the mayor, got that to the leadership up in DeWitt, and it's been a seamless process. Our dispatch center was notified that we will no longer be responding up into that community, and we have not had any issues in regards to what that looks like. I have a Metro Chiefs meeting day after tomorrow with the surrounding chief officers, and they will be providing an update on what DeWitt is doing as it relates to, did they contract out? Are they looking to start their own internal system? We'll get an update at that time on what DeWitt has done as a pivot, if you will. But yeah, Lansing Fire no longer responds up into that community.
Oh, thank you.
To
Councilman
clarify,
Cost?
DeWitt Township,
Yes.
not the city of
Not
DeWitt.
DeWitt City.
DeWitt Township.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
the city of DeWitt does their own EMS.
Yeah.
DeWitt Township, I think, just built a new fire station.
They did. I mean, it's a nice station, but they did not factor in operational costs or personnel costs. So it's basically a nice, big, pretty Taj Mahal warehouse.
So are you telling us that we could have a new North End station perhaps?
Boy, get out of my mind. Get out of my mind. I'm looking for creative. It's just a matter of the partnerships. And
There you go.
but again, yes, absolutely. We got to think big. Yeah.
Perfect.
Councilman
I-
Hussein?
Many moons ago, when you first started talking about this, I thought we were talking more about like quick response people, right? And I thought that the added benefit to that, and I don't know industry wide, I know we started exploring those many years ago, but I thought the added benefit was that instead of, as an example, if you have a ASL ambulance out, And then you have the need for additional EMTs and paramedics. You don't have to bring a rig out, right? So you're free. So have we looked at the idea of the quick response vehicles that are stood up as a BSL?
That's still a topic for discussion, and under the new leadership of the medical board, I think it's a bit more feasible now than it was then. Again, under the old medical direction, the protocol stated that you can deploy quick response vehicles, you can deploy echo units, even with just 2 EMTs, but there has to be a paramedic attached to that response. So it would mean that we could deploy an echo unit along with a fire truck or an engine. And that level of duplication within our system is just not feasible because our system is so heavy with calls that we're trying to address. So under the new leadership, that has not been broached as of yet because we've been focused on this BLS protocol piece. But it's just a matter of time before we bring that back up to see where we can find ourselves. In Lansing, with all of our fire recruits being mandated to become paramedics as a condition of employment, it's just a matter of time before we will have the bodies. Now, can we identify the apparatus to utilize them in the rigs and the fire trucks or the pickup trucks, whatever we want to put them on? So it definitely has some value. We'll be looking to explore that also.
And I know there's hurdles that have to be cleared. I just, when you brought that first up, I remember doing some research and I remember looking at a couple departments that they almost had like it was like a van on steroids, if you will.
Yeah.
And it was set up for BLS.
Yeah.
And what it allowed for a couple of EMTs
Yes.
to actually almost be like a mobile unit throughout
Exactly.
the city. And so they were able to very quickly and rapidly respond to those calls, which were freeing up the ALS and obviously the rigs. Okay. I'm glad you guys.
We're making some progress, and we're excited about the leadership of the new medical director at the Tri-County level. All of the fire chiefs in the area are very, very excited because, again, all of us are kind of dealing with the same issues with the wait times at McLaren or Sparrow, the candidate pool for hiring, the 2-year window to train a paramedic. We're all dealing with these similar issues. So it's just about the creativity to problem solve that has a positive impact. And we're going to continue to work on that.
Councilman
So-
Cass?
I guess I have one more question. It's funny that you brought up stub toe because that was one of the calls that I heard this weekend. Was someone stubbed their toe
Yeah.
and they needed to go to the hospital. So when we get a call like that, for example, or, my ear hurts or, I guess that's labeled as one of these basic life support
Low
calls.
acuity, yes, sir.
Do we give people, once they're at the hospital and whatever it is that, whatever treatment they get or don't get or discharged, do people actually call and ask to get dropped back off where they were through our department?
No. We drop them off at the hospital and then it's on them to kind of find their way. The funny thing about it though, those low acuity calls, typically I will struggle with the stub toe all day long. 4 o'clock in the morning is when I dial 911 because of the stub toe. Or I'll have the headache all day long. 3 a.m. is when I call. So that's a not so positive impact on what we do with what we see with the low acuity calls also.
Well, and I think that stub toe call didn't come from residents. They were just out.
Okay,
somewhere in the-
yeah, maybe
So-
took a fall or whatever.
Yeah. And I'm curious what the number would be from like different party stores across the city where people just come in and say, can you call an ambulance?
Oh.
My back hurts. I would be curious where the concentrations are, because I think that you had discussed that to see,
Yeah.
where those concentrations are. Especially if you're looking at something like a BLS or even perhaps something like Councilman Hussein had mentioned with the quick response van,
Yeah.
I bet that, I'd be curious to see what the maps look like.
Yeah, we're gonna be able to dial in a little more with that, with this research project that we have with MSU grad students. As a matter of fact, they are actually going to be looking to explore AI for predictive analysis for us based on past, based on history. Let's inject chatbot or whatever and see if we can predict where calls drop regularly so that we can identify those areas for resources that may be necessary.
So we're gonna have an AI ambulance? Is that what we're-
Well, I'm not quite sure we're there, but I think we have an opportunity to inject some AI into the analysis. But that's just where things are going now. Yeah.
Yeah, none of us will be sitting in here in 10 years. Bill Gates said AI will take everything, all the jobs.
Yeah, it's scary, but
Frightening.
yeah.
I'm done.
Any other questions or comments on these items? Chief, is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
No, I just really appreciate the support from this body, and I'd like to just encourage you folks to continue. You got a great fire department. We've turned the corner. We've moved the needle significantly with some of the things we've done over the last few years. The work continues, but you've got some great people that love serving this community, love working for you all. So please continue to support. We definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Huge thanks to you and all of your staff, you know, those folks, responders, as well as the support staff that you have in your offices. You know, every person makes a difference. So thank you for that. Okay, moving down to item 6, we have a resolution to introduce and set a public hearing to amend Chapter 1610, Section 1610.1, adoption of the 2021 International Fire Code. And, I suppose, do we have anyone who would like to speak to this as we get started with the conversation, or?
I'd like to just say something real quick.
Sure.
We're excited about this code because what it does for us, it provides a bit more detailed information relative to a couple of emerging trends that we see not only in our community, but around the country. One of those trends is electric vehicles. And the storage, the process of charging stations and things of that nature. So we need those levels of regulation. And there's also another component that's very critical for us as a fire department is the butane extraction process for the marijuana grows. So those are two areas within the 2021 code that are sorely needed. And this has been a priority for us for a few months now to bring those regulations up to speed so that we have a lot more guidance on what we do. There was some thinking about charging stations in the parking decks, and you know we have to be very, very careful because these electric vehicles, when these batteries burn, they burn hot, they burn fast, they are deadly. The scooters, the bikes. So this code update will do a lot for your fire department with the regulations and how we can mitigate some of those emergencies.
I suppose a motion for the resolution. Yeah, sure.
And this is asked all the time, but so the code council, this was published like way back, like November 2000, right? Why are we just looking at this now?
Well, I think it was a situation where priorities were established organizationally when I got on board on what was emergent, what was urgent, and what we need to focus on downstream. And it was one of those code updates that we needed to do some significant amounts of research.
Okay.
We had to partner with building safety and some other stakeholders to make sure we were aligned. The whole IFC code update is not really a seamless process. There are a number of moving parts that we have to employ to make sure that we've got T's crossed, I's dotted. Once we engage the OCA, that can be a process in and of itself, bless their hearts. And so, yeah, it takes time. It takes time.
Okay. And then do you know, I mean, because it is 2025, we're operating under what right now? 2018?
The 2018 code.
So do we know, as the code council, close to publishing the next?
Not real sure. I can find out for you, Councilman, but I'm not real sure right off the top. Typically, we tend to be a bit behind because it was, I think, 2021 when we adopted the 2018. So there's always this bit of a lag. Yeah, there's always a bit of a lag. Yeah.
And then I guess I have one question since we have Raleigh here too. So when we're looking at, I'm just wondering how the IFC is applied when we are doing residential inspections. Are your folks trained in that? Do we send an inspector out?
Sure.
So I'm looking at the inspection process, right?
So it depends on you define inspection. So I'll at least answer on how.
I'm thinking of like rental search. Does that come into play?
Sure, not necessarily, no. And so the time in which we interact with the chief's team is generally during plan review on any new construction or major renovations that require plan review, meaning when the architect or design professional submits, gets assigned depending on the types of review, assuming all trades, fire is one of those. And so the chief's team, the fire marshal's office manages that. And so then they're looking through their lens of the IFC to see if there's any commentary on the plan review documentation. Once plan review is done, building's built and building safety has issued a certificate of occupancy, building safety's out of it. If it's a rental in that case, code would inspect under IPMC in the ordinance and looks for things like smoke detectors and so forth.
Okay.
In terms of which fire marshal's office may be involved to enforce IFC or generally after buildings are open, whether they get called out to something and they have the powers to issue their own enforcement letters. And so if a landlord in that case, if there's a fire at a property, they may get a code enforcement letter, but they also may get an enforcement letter from the fire marshal's office that is referencing IFC. And so, yes, in that case, it would be up to the fire marshal's office, my understanding,
Yes,
is your
that is
enforcement
correct.
arm who would do that. We would likely call out similar things, but under IPMC.
Councilmember Haas.
Yeah, so to answer Councilmember Hussein's question, we already have a 2024 IFC that's out there. Some of the keys are energy storage systems updates, lithium ion battery storage, fire sprinkler requirements, CO2 alarm detection updates, A2L refrigerants, distilled spirits and wine, fire protection requirements, and improved readability. So I'm almost wondering if we shouldn't move to the 24.
I can't speak for IFC, but I am wondering, because we also draw from ICC for building and trade codes. We, for building safety, have to wait for the state to adopt. So I don't know if you're also under the jurisdiction of whatever the state IFC adopts in terms of ICC. So for example, there is a 2024 and probably soon 2025 mechanical code.
Right.
The state of Michigan just this last spring adopted the 23. For years, we were under the 15. Building, they adopted to 2021, yet there's a 24. And so I know my office falls on, we have to wait for the state of Michigan to adopt. I don't know.
I don't think we have to, but the process is similar to where there's typically this bit of a lag based on the time and the resources necessary to conduct the research to make sure this fits the community because it's broad based, but what impacts would that 2024 code have on the city of Lansing? There's a bit of redundancy. I think what you just mentioned, Councilman Cost, is the lithium ion battery storage as opposed to the 2021 code that talks about the charging stations and things of that nature. So there's something we could take a look at. I would not be averse to the
I
possible
think
update.
Michigan's adopted it.
Yeah.
And if they have, I just, perhaps Chief and I can work together on an update for all you know. I know the building code, which this isn't, my next comment isn't intended in a trumping of who says who. The building code in many cases trumps the IFC code, but it also references.
Yeah.
So I know the 21 building code that the state of Michigan just adopted references the 2021 IFC code. So
Right.
perhaps because the state took the 21 building code, which is why maybe we're trying to,
Yeah.
perhaps we can dig in and get back.
And I guess I would have a question that piggybacks off of everything that was just said. Would there be any drawbacks with moving forward with this particular resolution while continuing to research and look at the 2024 code? That way we do have an interim solution here, right? Like maybe we're not there yet to the 2024 code, but we do have some improvements to work with while we get there.
Yeah, that's actually a great suggestion. I would recommend that we adopt where we are with the 2021 as we continue the research, working with other stakeholders on the update to possibly get back in front of you with the 2024 code adoption. Absolutely.
Any other questions or comments?
Nope. And the resolution is for what, August 11th?
Yep.
Yes.
The setting of a public hearing for August 11th.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, passes unanimously. Okay, thank you so much. Moving on to item D, the ordinance to amend chapter 1460, section 1460.4A to require that rental dwellings have insurance covering tenant relocation costs. This item has been brought before full council, was referred back to committee. And do we have any questions or comments from committee members? We did hear one member of the public. I do want to acknowledge that we did have another member of the public walk in while we were, that was past the time for public comment, but we do have her comments in writing from an email that was sent today. So I would like to acknowledge that as well. Questions or comments from committee members on this item? Councilman Cost?
I think that it should be said, because we've heard it repeatedly said, there's this requirement, there's no requirement, there's an opt-out option on this that simply allows someone to sign off and say, we understand if something goes wrong, that we will be responsible if we don't do this part of it. So it's either this or that. There's no forcing of anyone to get this insurance. There's no forcing of an added cost. We've heard that. Rent will go up if we do this. Rents are going to go up. Been going up. So I think that that's, somewhat disingenuous to say, well, rent will go up because of this thing. It's going to happen. So I think this is a good step forward that we've spent years working on at this point. Again, I can't be more clear. You sign an agreement that says you understand you'll be responsible for the next portion that we're going to talk about later. If you don't choose to get this, it's not forcing it.
Yeah, any comments?
Yeah, I think in addition to, so I think kind of, I don't know, pairing that with, like that, I mean, I struggle sometimes when we talk about landlords, people forget that landlords are small business owners. And small business owners across the city, they're responsible for insurance, they're the riders on their insurance fees. Somebody comes into their business and does some measure of damage, they typically are coming out of their pocket or obviously paying for the insurance, and then they go after them civilly. But we treat landlords differently. And because we treated landlords differently for so long, we have nearly, it's a standing number around 800 red tags. And many of those are just incredibly unsafe for people to live in. And so we're trying to get after this inhumane, this unsafe standard of living that has just become almost commonplace in the city of Lansing. And I've heard people say, hey, we don't like this. We think this is what it's going to do. I don't think so. I think we have worked with law. I think we worked within this committee and some of our landlords throughout the community to make sure that we were responsive to some of those concerns. My challenge to anybody that opposes this is, okay, then what's the solution? This to me, I think it addresses a number of concerns. I think this was an inclusive process. And because of that, I think we have a pretty balanced ordinance. So I'm going to support moving this out of committee. But again, anybody that is not supportive, what is your solution? That's my question.
Yeah.
And I would just quickly add that, I do understand that we have, a lot of landlords and small business owners, and 95% of the landlords that we have in this town are amazing folks. This is, again, a very targeted effort, I think, that we have made as a committee and as council members past and present have tried to make to address that 5%, that 800 red tags, those people we know are the constant bad players. So I just wanted to make sure that I was clear that this isn't, when I say landlords, I don't mean everyone. I'm talking about that bad percentage.
Yeah, so just to add to the conversation, I have received some questions that I would like to bring up for the sake of addressing them because they were submitted, verbally to me. So I think it's worth, putting it out there and seeing maybe, if law has a response or for any reason, if EDP would have a response. There was a question about the tenant's role in some of these items that could lead to a red tag situation. My understanding from a previous conversation with law is that a lease agreement is a private agreement between the tenant and the landlord. And oftentimes there are items that are spelled out within that lease agreement that address tenant responsibility in some of those matters. And so just to put that out there, that is my remains my understanding. Lisa, if I have that wrong, please let me know. But that was my understanding when it comes to tenant liability. For instance, if a flooding of a basement or a room that becomes unsafe was caused by an action of the tenant. And then the home it comes to the point where it is red tagged. And so, you know, now the property owner, the landlord has a unit that is, or a home that is red tagged based on the actions of the tenant. And then they are taking now additional steps to address the issue caused by the tenant and relocate them and pay for that housing. I will say that, you know, there are many items within this particular ordinance that speak to, I'm sorry, in the next ordinance that would address those parameters, not as to the private lease agreement, but there are parameters around the timing, number of days and so on, and we will get into that. But just something I wanted to put out there on the record as a question that I had received. In addition, I was asked I'm going to hold on that because it has to do with the relocation fee portion. And just to say again, this is not a mandate. We don't mandate tenants to have renters insurance. And so we are not mandating property owners to carry this type of insurance rider. And I think we've all heard as a committee, those sentiments across the board. It either isn't available to me through my insurance company, or maybe it is, but it would be an additional cost. And it does boil down to you're not required to have this, but there is an understanding that if relocation is required, then that would move into, you know, the next ordinance that we're going to discuss. And at the heart of these, it really does address some of our most vulnerable residents who have no support system, do not have the resources to relocate. And so I do think that it's a good next step to, you know, put this before full council, have a vote on that. If there are other, you know, questions that arise, that's fine. But essentially, this is one tool that exists to help address the larger issue. So again, the insurance is not required, as has been said many times. It is an option with an acknowledgement that the next portion of this discussion would be, you know, the relocation fee. With that, I have no other comment, just to say that this is a complex issue, but again, a tool that's been thoughtfully crafted and helps to identify, you know, some of those issues and help some of our most vulnerable residents.
Move item D as written.
Okay, we have a proper motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. That passes. Next, we are on to item E, the ordinance to amend chapter 1460, adding a new section 1460.51 to create a tenant relocation fee and renumbering the existing section 1460.51. Any comments or questions related to the fee?
Yeah, I would just start with, I think that there has been some question about the tenant doing the damage. I think that there's also been conversation about, like, I think everybody thinks, well, if the utilities get shut off, I think one of these mentioned, if there's no utilities and it's red tag, then we'll have to pay the relocation fee. It says unsafe to occupy. And I believe we've had conversations with the department that the current system we use for red tags, when we say something is unsafe to occupy, would be too broad of a, how we're doing it now is too broad when we're talking about this specifically. Because this is a life safety issue that happens where someone needs to leave the house, correct?
Correct, but if this ordinance passes without an update to that, lack of utilities would be a red tag in the way the current ordinance is written.
But this doesn't mention red tag. It just says unsafe to occupy.
Sure.
So that doesn't necessarily, what I'm getting at is just because something's red tag doesn't mean it wouldn't fall underneath the quote unsafe to occupy.
I think what maybe I'm wrong, but based on, you know, we heard from Chief Backus and Assistant Chief Prattle. They talked about a myriad of things at our last public safety meeting. One of the things they talked about was red tags, enforcement, displacement. And they talk over and over again about how in the field, which I think applies to your folks too, there's quite a bit of discretion. And so I think when I look at this, the spirit is, if it is absolutely unsafe for them to live in that home, are they able to practice discretion if it's not a life of safety? Does that make sense?
It does. But but I'm saying if we are currently, if we are to determine if something's unsafe, we would then red tag it.
And I understand that.
Yeah, so yes, so maybe I'll hypothetically, which is a scary place to be. If you were without power right now and a code officer showed up, they have discretion to determine if that needs to be red tag, or if, maybe you just didn't pay and you're about to pay and it'll be back up to. Some of that discretion in theory could exist, and we wouldn't tag that for unsafe. But if there wasn't a solution, your power is out, that could be and has been a red taggable offense, which then, if I understand, if this ordinance passed, would be then considered on the department's unsafe. They can't occupy.
So when you say, and I understand what you're saying, because I went on a ride along and Tom used his discretion
Yes.
on that property. Now, the condition inside should never been safe to occupy, period. But the question becomes, do you throw this family out on the street, or do you keep a red tag on the property? And so I think there is room for judgment. I think the other conversation that we did have that I'm recalling is about making a different colored tag, because this doesn't mention red tag, where it's a life and safety as a result of the rental premise being declared unsafe and uninhabitable. There was a conversation that we had 6 months ago about that. Because this again is mute on any type of tag. It doesn't have a tag. Because I think there's a difference between unsafe and uninhabitable, and they didn't pay their electric.
Do agree. We haven't brought forward those changes. So as of today, if this passed and we were to consider something unsafe, we would be doing so by placing a red tag on the property.
So then it sounds like it maybe is a departmental question issue than it is this resolution or this ordinance.
To that point, Councilman Cost, I think we have a variety of ordinances that exist out there that they're not going to get in the weeds of the operational steps that are taken by the department, right? I mean, this is an overarching, with this one specifically, another tool to utilize, again, to help our most vulnerable residents. But it would not get into the weeds of how the department will move forward operationally with some of those items. And so I guess I don't know that the ordinance should address some of those things. We've heard, again, I'll bring up one other item. Okay, the tenant liability piece. I guess I'll just go back to that. Because that is part of the private lease agreement, this ordinance would not address that. And so that would be a private matter, just as it wouldn't address the steps that Raleigh and his staff would take to, operationalize the spirit of this agreement. What does that look like? There are some unknowns out there. Just as, there could be potential unknowns. We've heard in the full council meeting questions about how would this affect residents who hold Section 8 vouchers or housing vouchers. I did hear a comment from someone in this, I'm sorry, it skips back to the previous one. Some tenants are uninsurable and may not be able to obtain renter's insurance. So how would that piece work? There are a variety of items that we don't know. But again, the spirit of these is to move forward in a way to protect some of our folks that do not have other options and need a place to go. And when the city is responsible for paying those costs, how are we being reimbursed for that?
And I think it's the amendment that we're looking at now that contemplates all of that, right? And I fully agree, right? So I trust that the department will put internal policies in place that operate within this framework established by the ordinance. But I still think this is a good slate of ordinances. Go ahead there.
No, I just think that that was, me bringing that up is more so and trying to answer and get out into the public
Right.
that,
Mhm.
these are the questions that have been asked and realistically, yes, it doesn't address everything that way because
It's not-
some of this is supposed to be addressed by, the department, by how things are ran, so on and so forth. And as you know, with any of our ordinances, 2 years down the road, there may be a piece that doesn't work in here or something we need to add. These are living documents in some ways. So I think that this does capture the spirit of what we're trying to do and trying to address what seems like a constant battle with that small percentage of, landlords. And also safeguard our citizens so they have somewhere to go. So I don't receive a phone call at 2 a.m. that they've got 3 feet of sewage in their basement. Don't call code compliance because I won't have anywhere to go if I get thrown out of here.
Right. I do have one last question. I'm sorry, I had not brought that up yet. I did receive a question about the relocation fees. Currently, if the city were to relocate, let's just call it a family from a single family home, because it had been red tagged and the landlord, the city pays the fees, but we need to be reimbursed in some way. Would would that reimbursement go on taxes, on that property owner's taxes anyhow? It's unclear to me. I know that in the past, property owners have been sued so that the city can recover those costs. Is there any other way that they've recovered those costs? And I guess the long and short of my question is, if we collect through through placing it on the tax roll anyhow, what would the difference be? And I think that's something that should be addressed.
Yes, the cost of the relocation gets sent to the owner and then the ordinance provides on the last page there that any portion of the fee remaining unpaid after 30 days shall be a debt subject to collection as provided by law, meaning that the city can initiate a collection.
Sure.
So it doesn't get placed on the tax roll.
And then currently, if the city relocates a family and incurs that cost, there is no
Is there-
mechanism for
The city
recouping those
does not-
dollars.
Outside of
Legal action?
Well, yeah, so if there's a separate legal action and as part of that legal action, the city negotiates a relocation reimbursement or something along those lines. But this provides a more straightforward path to establish a fee and therefore a more straightforward path in collecting the debt.
Okay. I think, yeah, that does answer my question. Any other questions or comments on item E? Okay, with that, do we have a motion?
So moved.
Great, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, passes unanimously. The last ordinance, amended chapter 1460, section 1460.50 to update and correct internal references. This item is straightforward. It corrects internal references to the previous 2 ordinances we have discussed. Do we have questions, comments, and or motion?
I would move the item.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, I do not see anything on the agenda under other, but.
If I may.
Please.
Mr. Van Fossen, I have you here. 1612 Martin, 1033 Shepherd. Do we have any updates on those properties?
We received bids last week. I awarded it and they are en route to the mayor's office for signing of those contracts. As soon as those contracts are signed, hopefully this week, when I talk to Mr. Lawrence today in the mayor's office, that allows the contractor to begin pulling permits.
Do you know if the mayor has them in hand right now?
The email I sent this morning to Law and the mayor's office was asking whoever had it purchasing, send it into Laserfish today. And so Mark replied, I believe I should have those hopefully tomorrow, if not.
I'll text Andy and make sure they get signed ASAP. Because 1033 is not good.
Well aware, yes. Yes, well aware.
They
Yeah, just real quick. So we had some discussion at the last meeting about House Bill 4260, and that's the public revenue sharing bill, public safety revenue sharing bill. And it was discussed that Chief Baxter said that there had been a substitute that was adopted. He was correct. I think that was in the end of April through the House. It was then transmitted to the Senate. I think it was referred to their Appropriations Committee where it sat. And so I'm hoping that, and I can take a crack at it. So that's ready for the next agenda, but I'm hoping that at the next meeting, maybe we can place that under whatever, whether it's other or, and just maybe a resolution of encouragement. Have the Senate take that up and pass that.
Okay,
Just because you're always asking if there's other
Yeah,
things that we
yeah.
can add. The other piece is that, minutes of July 10th, which again was the last meeting, there was a presentation on chapter 654 noise. And we had, I think it was actually the last line, in the minutes stated the committee concurred on reviewing and updating the ordinance.
Mhm.
Committee will begin reviewing at the next meeting. So I'm hoping that maybe we can give ourselves a couple weeks to review and get our thoughts around it, place it out on the agenda for an initial discussion.
Yeah.
Unless you guys are.
I keep
No, that
dropping
sounds
the
great.
ball. Full schedule,
Okay.
so.
No, it's all good.
Yeah.
We're all
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, no, that sounds good.
We've had initial discussions though, like removing the
Okay.
accordion thing. that Makes noise. That's
Yeah.
still in there.
Yeah.
What is it called? A phonograph?
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. That's all I have.
Meeting is adjourned at 5:01.
Awesome.
What was your House bill number?
4260.